तन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः। नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि। त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि। ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि। तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु। अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। यश्छन्दसा मृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽधमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया आस्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं। शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरि विश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव कीर्तिः पृष्ठं गिरेरिव ऊर्ध्वपवित्रो वाजिनीव स्वमृतमस्मि द्रविणगुंसवर्चसक् सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः इतीत्यशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। आप्यायन्तु मम अङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रमथो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि। सर्वं ब्रह्मोपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत्। अनिराकरणमस्तु अनिराकरणं मे अस्तु। तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्माः ते मयि सन्तु। वाङ्मे शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। वाङ्मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम्। आविराविर्म एधि वेदस्य म आनीस्थः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासीः। अनेनाधितेन अहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि। ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि। तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु। अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारमवतु वक्तारम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। भद्रं नो अपि वातय मनः। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः। भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः। स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः। स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः। स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः। स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं। शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। नारायणं पद्मभुवं वसिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं शुकं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रमथास्य शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथास्य पद्मपादं च हस्तामलकं च शिष्यं तं तोटकं वार्तिककारमन्यानस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततो मानतोऽस्मि। So we're almost completing the Brahmasutra course, you might say. So in fact, I've made some definite plans for completing it. So let me just tell you about it. So today and next week will be the last two classes on the Brahma Sutra. So that will be class number 59 and 60. So we've had 60 classes in more than a year. So it's been quite a while. Anyway, so we will complete our review of the Brahma Sutra next week. Okay. So then after that, on the following week, which is May 7th, I have to go, my wife and I have to go to a friend's son's wedding in Los Angeles. And so I didn't mean to miss classes, but I was completing this anyway, so I thought I would take a break. So there will be no class on the 7th. Then we will have 5 weekends for having classes. That will be the 14th. I'll send you all this in an email, so that. But I'm just giving you a kind of a quick outline of what is going to come. So we will have 5 classes: 14th, 21st, 28th, June 4th, and June 11th. Okay. And the topic of that I have not yet decided, but I have some ideas on. We will take maybe just a short segment of a text, maybe a summary of something, just so that we have these 5 classes. Then after that, as many of you know, we are going to the retreat in Sailorsburg, which starts on Saturday the 18th and lasts through the following Saturday, which is the 25th of June. And so there's quite a few of us now have accumulated, about 18-20 people. And if you're still interested, then please let us know. But that will be the time when we'll be away, so there will be no classes. Then the weekend coming back from there will be the 2nd of July. And as you know, that is part of the 4-day weekend. We usually don't have classes on 4-day weekends. And so we won't have a class on July the 2nd. So really we will have a new text, whatever we decide to do, starting with July 9th. If we decide to do that, if we want to continue to have classes, then the new text will begin on July 9th. So that is a general plan that I was looking at. So with that in view, let us complete a brief tour, almost like an outline tour of some of the verses and some of the topics, adhikaranas, that Swami Paramarthananda had recommended. So I had already talked about it last time. So we will do that today and next week. And the idea here is that those of you that want to continue to study the importance of Brahmasutra can do so on your own. And those of you that know Sanskritam, you have a very good way for us to look at the Vayasika Nyayamala as a very brief introduction to the Brahmasutras. So this is what the page numbers that I will refer to even today, and so you can do so. The Sanskrit is not that difficult and short, so you can try to decipher the sentences in Sanskrit. And if you do happen to know Hindi, then there is a translation of the Sanskrit verses given in this particular book that I had recommended, so that will be easier for you to do so. And for those of you that don't know Sanskrit and just want to do it in English, then with the references on these recommended by Swami Paramarthananda, you can go to Swami Gambhiraranda's book that I had already recommended. And you can just look at the three segments, which is the first one is the chapter, the second one is the section, and the third one is the topic. So it is given very nicely. So you can actually do the same thing even if you're not going to go through Sanskrit. So that's the plan. And I think that you can take your time and review some of the sutras, and keeping in mind as to why this particular Brahmasutra helps us. This is what we have to really see. Constantly we have to look at to see where does the study help us. So just to review that in summary, and then we will go ahead with the tour of the Adhikaranas. Brahmasutra, and I think I've mentioned this before also, and I think that this is an important designation given by my teachers. The Brahmasutra should be looked at as the ultimate authority on things that may not be that clear to us. And so in any kind of thinking, vichara on some subjects, then there needs to be a structured way to look at the topics and to resolve it in terms of wisdom in the minds of people. And so we find that there are people who are very, very wise, very smart, very intelligent. And so whenever we run into some issues and some doubts, we have to really resort to what will they think? What do they say about it? That's the whole idea about having a legal system where you have the ultimate authority of the Supreme Court. And of course, as you know very well, the human Supreme Courts are tinged with biases of one kind or the other, either liberal or conservative. And on a given day, one of the Supreme Court justices who is not feeling well and is not able to think very properly. And so all those defects are there in the human Supreme Court. But in the Paramarthika Supreme Court, which is only, you don't have I don't know how many there are in Supreme Court, 12 of them. You just have Ishvara, who is really the creator of the whole world. And if there are doubts in the minds of the people in his created world, he resolves it by saying, this is the way you should think. This is the way you should think. This is the resolution. This is the conclusion. And the emissary of Ishvara in the form of Vedavyasa, who is himself a he's like the avatara of Vishnu, not ordinary person. He was able to now classify it in various topics and say this is how the resolution is and so on. Anyway, all of this, but what I'm saying is that how it should help us, the study of Brahmasutra, is that as we have doubts about this very subtle vidya, which we all do, it's not an easy thing because it's contrary to our experiences in life. And so to see the subtlety of it, it requires a very careful study. And so in that careful study, doubts come up, and which we may not be able to resolve ourselves. Certainly you can go to some of the Upanishads and so on, but a compendium of all the major topics that can result in some doubts have to be taken up systematically. And this is what the Brahma Sutra does. So therefore, the study of the Brahma Sutra will be useful for us as we begin to gain a certain stature in our own mind, as we improve our eligibility as a student. Then you will see that the topics that are discussed in the Brahma Sutras become more relevant, and you begin to really increase the type of subtlety in your mind. And the subtlety of the mind comes from education. You see, this is the thing. If you look at one example of this would be that if you look at someone who has not studied in school, we have so many people in India that we are aware of that never go to school. They don't even go to primary school. So their arithmetic, their math has to be very, very elementary and very obvious. I gave you 5 mangoes and each mango costs this much, and so I need, this much money for the mangoes, or something like this. This is the level of arithmetic that they can do. But I think that as you begin to become more educated in terms of equations, formulas, derivations, and so on and so forth, then your level of math becomes more subtle. And you're able to really calculate and so on. And then, of course, you can use the computers and do wonders. Very similar to that is the study of Vedanta, where in the beginning you are just sort of looking at, here's the Atma, here's the Anatma, and what is the differences, and so on. You're uneducated spiritually. But as you begin to delve into it in more with more study and more eligibility, then these subtle topics become more relevant to you. So this is the advantage of studying the Brahma Sutra, and I think we have done it as a structured class for a while. The first 4 were the most important sutras, and we spent a lot of time doing that. And now we are giving you an idea of what the rest of the study could look like, and you're pretty much on your own. If we had a chance, if we could do this every day, like Swami Paramarthananda ji does, then we could take a structured, complete course on Brahma Sutra. But since we don't, I think we will terminate this class after next week and then leave it up to you to pursue on your own, and I'm sure you are very capable of doing so. So anyway, so that's where the overall importance of Brahma Sutras is. And of course, it needs to be said, and I remember discussing this with Swami Viditatmananda ji for a long time, and he's a very real person, really. It's just he doesn't pretend, and he doesn't really and so he knows that Brahma Sutra should not be studied unless you have really done quite a few of the Upanishads. And so he used to discourage me from saying, no, this has been 4, 5, 6 years. I used to say, Swamiji, should I teach Brahma Sutra? And he would normally say, no, I don't think so, not yet. And what it took me was, so this was one issue, which is that Brahma Sutra becomes much more relevant if you already have a background of study on the Upanishads. The other thing was the Brahmasutra should be studied in Sanskrit. And because it is so terse, so precise, that it is not easy to decipher unless you know Sanskrit. And many of you, even though you are relatively experienced students and so on, may not have that kind of a knowledge of Sanskrit. So that was another issue. So then last year, a year and a half ago, we found out that Swami Paramarthananda had given some classes where Sanskrit was not really required, and in the wisdom of his experience, he was able to translate that into concepts. So I thought that that I would adopt it also. So it's kind of like I wouldn't say compromise version, but certainly a more softer version of Brahmasutra. And so I embarked on it, and here we are, 60 classes later, almost complete with what the objective is. So this is how the Brahmasutra is. All right, with that, let us continue on with a brief outline description of the remaining sutras. I think you have a copy of, I believe you have a copy, I don't know. If you don't, I have to tell me on the chat window if you have a copy of the recommended list of sutras that Swami Paramarthananda had given through Srimati Shanti Ganesh in Mumbai. She really studies a lot with Swami Paramarthananda. So I happened to be talking to her, and she says, yes, Swami Paramarthananda has given us an outline of what to study on our own. If we are not doing every sutra, but just a few of them, here's what he recommends. So I got that list, and that's what I'm following. Even that I'm not able to do completely because it'll take us too long. So you have that list. If you don't have it, then I can send it to you again. But from this list, we did chapter 1. Then we did pada number 3 and adhikara number 8. You remember, this is the one that we did last time, which is angushta matraha purushaha. So an analysis of angushta matra purusha. Again, Brahmasutra actually always refers back to passages from various Upanishads. It doesn't independently stand on its own. It just tries to resolve any doubts about the passages from Upanishads. That's all it does. So this is why it is not called, it's called Vedanta Sutra. Brahma Sutra is Vedanta Sutra, which means that all the Upanishads are the very source of the knowledge. There's no other, it's not an independent source. So we did that. So today, let's continue on. So now, with the next one we will do is chapter 1, fourth pada, and some adhikaranas, 1, 4, 7, and 8. We will do that. So let's look at that. So, 141 is on page 74 of the Vyasa's Nyayamala, Vayasika Nyayamala. The Vayasika means of Vyasa. Is the sixth case of Vyasa, Vayasika, Taddhita. Taddhita Prakaranam, Taddhita Pratyaya, Vayasika. So, in this book, it is given on page 74. So, the author of this book does a very good job of introducing what the topic is. So, Chaturtha padasya prathama adhikaranam acharayati. I won't go through the Sanskritam, I just want to go on very quickly and give you a Sanskrit. But here is what it says. It says that in the Kathopanishad, there is a segment which says avyakta mahatah param avyaktam. So this avyakta, what does it mean, the avyakta, one which is not seen? What does it refer to? So there is a possibility of it being one or the other. And so there the sutra resolves by the context of what was said before it. So that sometimes the same words can have slightly different meaning depending on the context under which they appear. So this is what the Siddhanti here points out. Atmanam rathinam viddhi. So and so on and so forth. So therefore, using that context, it says that avyakta refers to the sharira, not to pradhanam. So this is, I'm going to leave it there. There's some other ones that are going to be clearer, but this one I think you can just study it if you want to do it. Anyway, so this is all it is. Then in the first adhyaya, fourth pada, there is a fourth sutra which is given on page 81. This also is okay, not crucial for you to see. But what it says here is the Jagat Karanam. What is the cause of this world? How it was created? So here the Purva Paksha says that I find inconsistency in the Vedas as to what created this world. Inconsistent. Asamanvaya. Samanvaya means consistency and asamanvaya means non-consistency. So he says, I find that there is not a consistent way to do this. So there the Siddhanta says, no, I cannot entertain that thought because it is not proper. Shruti, the Tatparya Nishchaya of the Shruti, the ascertainment of the true import of the Vedanta is one. So there cannot be inconsistency. Inconsistency means kind of like duality and doubtfulness. No, there's no doubtfulness. It is just the way we look at it. It appears that some words appear to have a different meaning, but they don't. And so this one provides us with the tools on why there is lack of inconsistency in the Vedanta Shastra, as far as the Karanatvam, the Jagat Karanatvam, the very cause of the whole creation, is being discussed. That is the main purpose of this particular sutra. All right. The next one is more interesting, which is 147. Okay, 147. And so this one is given on page 87. And here the doubt is Brahman only the nimitta karanam or also the upadana karanam? This is a very important thing for us to really look at. One of the very fundamental things that we should really understand, and if we don't understand, wrestle with it until we understand. And we've talked about this in our classes many times, but this topic is brought to a head in a particular adhikarana, which says, so I'll tell you the Sanskrit, I'll just read the Sanskrit for it. He says, Jagat, this is given on page 87 after the two verses. Well, you know, that's the traditional way that the Purva Paksha is given in the first verse, Siddhanta is given in the second verse. And then there is a text that explains it. So I will go over the text. It says, Jagat karanatva pratipadikani sarvani vakyani vishayaha. He says that all the sentences in the Vedas deal with the topic of what is the cause of this Jagat. Because in order to understand the Jagat, you have to see how it was caused. What did it come out of? And so that means that you have to see what is the future, all of that. So the Karana Vichara is much more important than Karya Vichara. So, you know, the typical example is that if you're making clay pots, then to understand how the clay pot is made is much more important than making a particular clay pot. You can enjoy the shape and the beauty of a particular clay pot, but then the next thing would be, I wonder how this was made. And so you have to think about how the earth is wetted, so you have dirt, and it has to be some consistency. You cannot do it out of sand, for instance. You cannot make pots out of pure sand. It won't stay together. So you have to have the right ingredients, and then you have to put the right moisture. And there is an art to it where the clay, you have to turn it into clay, and the clay has a certain moisture content in it, and it's malleable. And then you have to put some kind of a rotating machine, and that there must be some way with the hand to shape this, or some machine to shape it. And then you have to let it dry. So all of those are the karana of the pot. Karana of the pot. By the way, just on the topic, it just occurred to me. I was reading. I've been reading Swami Shankaranandaji's Bhagavad Gita, and really enjoying it. Just the whole Bhagavad Gita is revealing its secret to me much more clearly than I was able to do that before. So I keep recommending it to you also, that as you begin to improve your eligibility, and go back to the same text that you had studied before. It's not like, like in Bhagavad Gita, you might say, for instance, we have done the the lesson course, the home study, and we know Bhagavad Gita. We don't need to do that. Now we have to study, and I see this really. I'm just saying it because I see the um, some of the students make such statements. We need to study books that are talking about Nididhyasana. We have done all of that. What are the books on Nididhyasana? Okay, so Naishkarmyak Siddhi by Sureshvacharya. That is a Nididhyasanam text. So the other ones we have done before, we don't need to do that anymore. We have to come up with more advanced texts and so on. And that may be the case. I'm not disputing it that you have to do that. What I'm suggesting, however, is that if you look at, for example, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad Gita is called the fifth Veda. It is a complete treatise and especially useful for us householders, grihasthas. So Arjuna is a upalakshana. He's an example of a grihastha which is going through a lot of problems. How do I solve it? I've got real life issues. I've got a fight going on. Similarly, here also you have to go to office and there's people say you got to do this and you don't want to do it and it's sometimes unethical. What do I do? So the Bhagavad Gita is a very revered text, but to sort of put it aside and say I know I'm going to go to Naishkarmya Siddhi and so on and so forth may not be the right answer. So what I would suggest to you is that every few years, if you have been sincerely studying Vedanta, you should go back to some of the original texts and study it again and you will say, wow, I didn't know that. Recently I started the revision of having finished Panchadashi and so on. Then I also, I've been studying a lot of Sri Rudram. I decided that I'm going to take the Swami Shankarananda's Bhagavad Gita. And it's so interesting. This is one of the things I've discovered and I would recommend to you also, is that if you take certain initiatives that are initiative means something new. Why a thought came to me that really I have not studied the Shankarananda's Gita. And I have a book. And why don't I study it? But I was, and I started studying, I think I studied first chapter number 8 first. I decided this is so revealing. His way of teaching, way of giving examples is just so revealing that I'm going to start it from the beginning. So I didn't do chapter 1, but the real teaching starts with chapter 2, so I've been doing it. And I tell you, I am just getting so much out of it. Amazing. Just the normal things in the Gita that I'm very familiar with. That's the advantage. You already have a knowledge of the Gita verses, so I don't have to study the verses themselves. But the revelations behind the verses through a commentary by Swami Shankarananda, and I'm very, very fortunate that this is where is that book? Is it close to, anyway, I have it in the other room. I wish I could it's about 900 pages of very small print. So much material in there. It's all in Sanskrit. But I'm very fortunate that it has a Hindi translation. And the Hindi is just very Sanskritized Hindi, as it is in all the other cases also. What a joy reading through this. I think I'm up to chapter 6 now, starting with the very beginning. So there, the examples given, this is what triggered my thought. Sometimes some examples are given that you had not thought about. So this is what triggered my thought. So Swami Shankarananda says, listen, supposing you see pots. There's I remember when we built a home or we moved into our first home in Los Gatos back in 72. Then my wife and I, this was a new home, and so we had just bought it, and there was no furniture, no landscaping outside, so we just started doing this on our own. And one day we were driving in near Santa Cruz, and somebody either told us about it or whatever, but they said you must go to a pottery place which is managed by certain Mexican immigrants. And they say that you get the best pots for your garden from there. I still remember that. What an experience. I mean, we could not get out of the place. Everything was so beautiful and inexpensive, really. They were like $2 or $3, $5 like this. I think we overdid it. We must have made several trips. And there were so many clay pots all over the place. Some were big, some were small, some were tall, all kinds of stuff. Really enjoyed that. So the example given in the Bhagavad Gita's, I forget which chapter it is, but Swami Shankarananda says, listen, just like you have pots, many pots that you see, like in this Mexican place that we saw, your drishti should be, these are essentially nothing but the dirt on the earth. Because that's how they came out of. And yes, for a while you had to put some water into it, and then you make it. That's why I was giving that example, that you make a pot out of it and so on. But that's very temporary. Because over time, it's going to just become back. It is really nothing but earth. So either it is unshaped earth, which is all over the place. This is the whole, you don't have to go look for, you're not in some foreign, you're not in moon where you're looking for some dirt. You're on earth where the dirt is all over the place. Earth is there all over the place. And then you create a certain pot which takes a certain distinctive shape and name and so on, and utility and so on. And they all look very different from each other and so on. That's fine. But does it ever not appear to you that it is really just a common dirt all over? And he says that for a Vedantin, this is what life should be looked at. How? So for example, we have always given this example of, when you are in a dream, the same consciousness which is undifferentiated becomes you the dreamer, becomes you the dreamt, becomes you the very things in the dream, the sun and the moon and the tables and chairs and cars, same thing. They all made into some kind of a particular shape. And then they came out of the consciousness and they got dissolved in the consciousness. And Swami Shankarananda says, a Vedantist should see this fact that this world of plurality and all the gunas, all the changes, all the shapes and functions, human, non-human, moving, non-moving, all these are like clay pots. And they all have different utilities, different functions. So for example, when we become a human being at the beginning of a life, there is a function for a mother who brought you in, and a father, and a function for your family. These are all separate, specific things, and some friendly, some less friendly, whatever it is, but there is a lot of specificity about it. It's like clay pots. But really underlying all of that is that they are non-different from Brahman. They came out of Brahman, and even while they are there, they appear to be separate, but they are not. Even when you have a dream character talking to you, it is really the reflection of your own consciousness shaped in the form of somebody talking to you. It is consciousness alone. This is a beautiful example. That visualization of the clay pots. So he says that the clay pots are nothing but earth, undifferentiated earth. So similarly here also, it is nothing but consciousness. And then the Maya Shakti, through the Maya Shakti, it appears to be separate from you. But it isn't. Anyway, so coming back to this reference, it says that Ishvara is talked about as the intelligence behind the creation. Intelligence meaning, if you look at the clay pot, there is a person who's well trained. I've seen people who just make pottery and they love it. This is their hobby. They can start to paint it and all of that, but the basic clay making is something which is an extremely beautiful hobby. And they are skilled at it, how to make pots out of it, how to make it more rugged so it doesn't break, all those kinds of things. They are the intelligence behind it. But as in intelligence, they have to look for material outside of them. They don't have the material which is dirt is not inside of their bodies. They have to look for it outside. So here, this is an important, very important topic, adhikarana. Why? Because if you look at the religious / spiritual disciplines in the whole world, they make a big mistake. Very, very crucial mistake that gets them off track. This is the non-Vedic thinking. And the crucial mistake is they all agree that God is all-knowing, kindness, the epitome of kindness, all-knowing, and all-power. They all know that. It's kind of like the pot maker this is the extreme pot maker. They created the whole world. They all agree to that. Where they make the mistake is they do not look into the material cause of the creation. They'll say, oh, they can find it somewhere. From where? Where is that material going to come from? Is it going to be, what is it? Because this has enormous implications. They get off track. So when you define the externality of material from God, the implications are enormous. For starters, the implication is that God is very limited, because you don't have the material. You have to go get it from someplace. Where is it going to get from? And they remain very vague by saying, oh no. Because the God is Sarva Shaktiman. Not only is he Sarvagyaha, intelligence, but he's also Sarva Shaktiman. Sarva Shaktiman means very powerful, extremely powerful. So he will figure out a way to get the material. This is how they explain. Very vague. Yeah, don't look into the material part of it. Main thing is so here the thing is, what does Vedanta say? Is the Vedanta say that is he just the nimitta karanam, which nimitta karanam means the intelligence behind the creation, or is it also the upadana karanam? So here then the Purva Paksha says, so what the Purva Paksha does is to take isolated passages from the Shruti and says, it says is right here. So he says in Purva Paksha, Shruti में सृज्यमान पदार्थों का ईक्षण कहा गया है. Means that the Shruti talks about the created things which is seen by Ishvara. So first you see it, because you cannot visualize creation until you can put it in your mind. So this is called ikshana. इसलिए कुम्हार आदि के समान ब्रह्म निमित्त कारणम है, मृदादि के समान उपादान कारण नहीं है. So he says, just like a pot maker, Ishvara is the creator, not like clay. And so to the answer to that, and how is the answer given, what references you should have, and this is also part of the same thing where you say this is inconsistency. So here the Siddhanta says, please, look into it. Don't just make a fantastic statement by looking one statement and then carrying it as the whole thing. So he says, Shruti mein, in the Taittiriya Upanishad and a lot of other places also, he says, Bahusyam, may I become many. This is part of the creation. May I become many means what? Means I am one at the moment, but may my creation be in multiple copies of myself. Exactly like a dream. This is what we do every night. We are one before we go to, when we have the dream, but for whatever reason, and we've all discussed that, the reasons and so on, we won't go into that. For whatever reason, we create copies of ourselves and create a drama as though I am many. So this means that I am, first of all, this is interesting, I have the ability to have dreams. I have the ability to have dreams. I'm a creator of dreams. I have enough intelligence, enough memory. Hey, sometimes when I wake up from a dream and I just, how did I come up with all these sophisticated things in the dream? I don't understand how that happened. So you are the creator, you are the nimitta karanam, but you are also the upadana karanam. Because you cannot have a dream experience without one becoming many. So you are both the upadana karanam as well as the nimitta karanam. This is argued in this particular. So this is an important one that you should study sometimes. So it gives into all of that. So I'll just stay. Then the next one, which is the very, very next adhikarana after that, is 148, which is on page 88. And so there is a corollary to this Upadana Karana discussion from 147, and it has to do with a further explanation of, does the Brahman require certain things to help him be the Karanam? And this gets more detailed. I won't have time to go into this. But this goes into the scientific theories about, the ultimate particle, the paramanus, the strings, the string theories of, and so on and so forth. Doesn't the God need those kinds of things to create? So there is he needs something. So the Siddhanti says, please, no. Because he needs it, because that's how the creation is made. So you need to create certain fundamental particles. So there were no fundamentals. Then you are negating the whole idea that needs to be a separate upadana karanam. No, we've already said there is no separate upadana karanam. It all comes from the same consciousness, same Brahman. And so if you need certain ingredients to create a dream, you are capable of doing so. This is the Maya Shakti. That's a discussion on 148. So this is called Jagat Karanatvam. Very nice, very nicely done. Okay. So we are done with chapter 1 actually now, according to the outline given by Swami Paramarthananda. So they were, in his topic, there were 9 topics and 27 sutras on chapter 1. Then we move on to chapter 2. Okay. In chapter 2, there is second. Page 90. So in this book, the subject of the second chapter also is talked about, and so the topic of the whole chapter is avirodha akhya. Avirodha akhya means that there is no. So this is the chapter that visits the Sankhya philosophy, which is the most prevalent philosophy through the years. Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya philosophy, really, I think what you should see is like the modern science. So the doubts in people's mind is that the modern science is the one that can create everything. Enormous implications. So modern science means that you have the Big Bang, it all began, and they're all looking into it to see how long this Big Bang took place. There's recently, they have found that there are certain stars that are the farthest away from us and closest to where the Big Bang took place. So once we understand that, then we will know exactly how the Big Bang is evolving, how is it going to affect us. This whole thing about observation and drawing conclusions from the observation, that is really the essence of the Sankhya philosophy also. And so the modern science is in some way an offshoot of the Sankhya philosophy. And so there you can have any amount of discussion about the Sankhya says this, and how come the Vedanta doesn't agree with it, and so on and so forth. And the gist of the Adhyaya, and this is a very long Adhyaya, Adhyaya means a chapter, very long one. Swami Paramarthananda had given this, that this is the longest Adhyaya, is that really speaking, you are comparing two different things altogether. We agree that in the creation itself, there is some progression but you have to stand back and look at it to see whether this creation is real or not. We say that the creation is a non-creation. So again, going back to the example of the dream, there is no real dream. And you have that experience. Try telling your dream to your spouse. And if the spouse is in a very good mood, your spouse may listen to your dream. Most of the time they'll say, can we talk about this later? I've got some emails to do. They're too busy in their lives. The dreams don't matter. It's not real. So this is what Vedanta says, is that you can talk about Vaisheshikas and Sankhyas and Yogas and all that, because that is all within the creation. We say there is no creation. You cannot compare the two. So there is no avirodha. So for that reason, we won't really spend a lot of time looking into this. But if you want to, you can. Okay. And so here, on 211, Adhikarnas 1 to 13. So starting with page 90, there is a systematic proposal for the various schools of thought that differ, and they propound it and say, no, we are saying this. And so the Siddhanti says no. Doesn't make any sense. Anybody else? Then the yoga person comes up and he says, we don't agree with the Sankhya. This is the way it should be. So we say we don't agree with you either. So like that, there is from 1 to 13, they briefly discuss the proponent that proposes some kind of a theory, and we look at it and we say it doesn't make any sense for the following reason. It's not like you dismiss it without any reason, but you point out why this doesn't make any sense. And so that is all given. So then in the second pada, Adhikarana number 1, so 221, is specifically talking about pradhana, the natural forces. And I think we have done enough in the first 4 sutras that we did that you don't need to really spend a lot. I certainly don't really want to. I've understood enough about it to say that it doesn't bother me. I have an explanation for it. It's okay. Now let's go to the more interesting one, which is 2.3. And Swami Paramarthananda has said Adhikaranas 10 to 17. So chapter 2, pada 3, Adhikaranas number 10 to 17. So the number 10 is on page 133. This is an interesting one that is worth really visiting. I would recommend that you go through this. So here, the discussion is about the jiva, the human being, the nature of the human being. When did it begin? If it began, what are the implications? Is it sentient or non-sentient? Is it isolated or not? Is there doership in the jiva or not? If there is an appearance of doership, I did this, which it is the appearance sustainable or is it just transitory? Is it just a kind of a phenomena that comes and goes? Is the doership generic to the jiva? Or is it is it intrinsic to the jiva? Or is it incidental to the jiva? So I think these topics are worth visiting because we have certain doubts. We don't talk about pradhana and all that, that's all done with. But me as a person, I have certain experiences. I'm the one who is doing things. I don't see Ishvara into the picture at all. I'm turning left, I'm turning right, and I'm looking up, I'm looking down. I'm the one who's deciding to do so. And so my doership and enjoyership or sufferingship is real, isn't it? This is the question, this is the doubt that we have. So what does the Shruti say about it and why? So those topics are given in the third chapter. In the third pada of the second chapter, 10 through 17, pages 133 to 140, and I would imagine that you will study that. You should study that. That's what I mean to say. You know what? Let me just talk a little bit about this doership thing. this bhoktritvam and kartritvam, and some thoughts about that. Which here's the funny thing is that as you study this subject of Atma Vidya, it is not very clear how one's mind becomes illuminated. How does one understand? A very funny situation. It's not like you study one sentence and now you got it, then you go to the next sentence, you got it. And so if you go to 100 sentences, you now have the meaning of the 100 sentences. He doesn't like that. Suddenly, so this is an interesting thing, because in a way it is like, and I've talked about this, building a jigsaw puzzle. So supposing you're asked to put together some puzzles from pieces, and you can find individual pieces that fit together, that make sense, and you have a certain satisfaction. So you say, oh, this is a green, and this green I think should come together, and so you put them there and he says, yeah, they fit. And so you're very happy about that. But you don't get the full picture of what the jigsaw is showing you. And the big picture has a completely different implication. It might say that there are two horses that are being carried through a forest by one person who is holding the reins of both of the horses. This is the picture. But by looking at the individual things, you don't get this kind of a thing. Somehow, while you are building, you begin to see the whole picture. And it's a funny thing how it happens. I'll tell you why I'm bringing it up, because this kartritvam and bhoktritvam, I was not able to really get it, even though I have Shraddha, that if the Shruti says that the kartritvam and bhoktritvam, the doership and the enjoyership, the sense that I am the one who is doing and not doing and so on, is there, but it really belongs to Ishvara, not to the Jiva. Is what the Shruti says. In effect, it's just saying is that in a dream, when you say, I am doing this, you as a waker is not doing it. Is what it essentially says. But I was not able to really quite wrestle with it. I said, I am the doer, I am the one who is doing it. Was it until some casual statement that I saw by Swami Maheshananda? It happened, I think, relatively recently, about 6 months ago, or even less than that. I don't know which ones I was studying. This is why your extensive study is useful, because this kind of an idea of understanding can come from suddenly by studying something, and then the whole picture becomes very easy. Here is what really made me understand what is going on. Swami Maheshananji says, and he must have explained this elsewhere, but he just talked very briefly about this. He says the doership and enjoyership, kartritva and bhoktritvam, is just vasanas from prarabdha karma. I tell you, when I saw that, I had a flash that, oh my goodness, how could I miss this? And I'm not sure that I can, really convince you, because it's just an incidental kind of a thing. But for me, it became, the stumbling block was gone. Just this one statement. So let me explain a little bit and then we'll end the class. What he's saying is, so the prarabdha karma, this is where I think I've mentioned that a couple of other times also. Then understanding of the prarabdha karma is very, very useful. The whole implication of prarabdha karma is extremely instructional, very revealing. It's not just a theoretical thing, this is prarabdha karma, this is kamya karma, and then you go on to the next one. You have to really look at the implications of that. So what it says is really interesting. It says that, and I think the examples given by our acharyas, Swami Chinmayananji, Swami Dayananji and all that, those are very good. It is exactly like prarabdha karma is where you have a huge train, an engine backed by so many of these bogies of people or carrying some goods and so on. It's a very heavy train. And it's hurtling through. And then you switch off the engine. Sometimes supposing they say there's an obstruction, you better not travel anymore. Or you better shut it off, just stop it. So the engine driver stops it. He turns off the steam engine and so on and puts on the brakes. But then, as you know very well, what happens is that because of the sheer momentum, the train continues to move for a while. Move means that steam is still coming out, the wheels are still rotating, the brakes are squealing, the whole train is still moving forward, but it is going to come to a stop. It's as though it is running, but it is not running. It has been stopped. Similarly, the kartritvam and bhoktritvam is part and parcel of taking a birth in this life. But even after you understand that really kartritvam and bhoktritvam belong to a jiva, not to the atma, the feeling that I am the karta and I am the bhokta continues to be for a while. And so one has to really now look to see, how is it that I used to think I'm a karta completely? Because sure enough, it needs the help of Atma. And even when you are partially understanding is the kartritvam and bhoktritvam is there, but it diminishes. It diminishes. And in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 4th chapter, it talks about in great detail, when you are seeing Pashyan, Grinhan, etc., there is no kartritvam. Slowly you begin to see all this is happening is just the Maya Shakti. Once I understood that this is a leftover, kartritva and bhoktritvam is a leftover samskara from prarabdha karma. My goodness, my fighting through that, how can this be, and this, that or the other, just went away. Anyway, so with that I will end today's class, and we will visit a few other topics next week and then wind it up as I mentioned before. I'll try to give you as much of kind of like a tour of the rest of it, but then this class is now coming to an end. So let me just end this particular class with a prayer and then see if you have any question. Ashubhani nirachaste tanoti shubhasantatim smriti matrena yat pumsam brahmatan mangalam param atikalyana rupatvat nitya kalyana samshrayat smartranam varadatvat cha brahmatan mangalam viduhu ओंकारश्चाथ शब्दश्च द्वावेतौ ब्रह्मणः पुरा कंठं भित्वा विनिर्यातौ तस्मान्माङ्गलिकौ उभौ ओमथ 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 न असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय ओम पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ओम शांति 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 हरिः ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ओम just the Maya Shakti. So, Virendra, your question on where to get the Vayasika commentary, I sent a link to you that was given by a couple of students. I think Chawla Joshi and maybe Amit had given that link, and I sent it to you. If you look at the previous emails from me, you should be able to find that. A PDF is available online, and you should be able to look at that. So that part is easy. Now this Shankaranandji's commentary, I am not sure of the English translation availability. I kind of doubt it. And I really think this is a contribution that needs to be made. It's just remarkable. I mean, for one thing, I would just say this. In terms of quantity of information, it is 10 times more than the Shankara Bhashya. So we've all studied the Adi Shankara Bhashya. But this one is much, much thicker. In fact, you know what, if you give me 1 minute, I think I have it in my other room. Let me give it to you. Hold, I'll be right back. Okay. So this is the book I was talking about. It's 900 pages, and look at the size of the print. In fact, I have to wear glasses early in the morning when my eyes are not focused very well. So there is the verse of the Gita, then there is a Sanskrit commentary, and then the Hindi translation of the Sanskrit commentary that goes in. Extremely voluminous. And so in terms of pure quantity itself, it is just, and not only that, but his quality, the way he references the various from where it is, makes arguments and makes it so clear. So first of all, let me just talk about where to get it from. So I am not aware of any English translation of this. Good luck if you can find it, let me know. But even this Hindi translation, perhaps it is available in other vernacular languages that I'm not aware of, but the Hindi translation also is not easy to get. We did find something recently. Both Chawla and Amit were able to. Chawla, I think, sent us a link for it. Incidentally, Swami Viditatmananda ji, as Chawla told me, is teaching this very Bhagavad Gita with Shankaranand's commentary in Gujarati. So he is giving classes on that. It's just incidental. I'm taking up the same study as he's teaching at the same time. So the Hindi translation is available. You can get that. I am still trying to find the book itself, because it would be very nice if it had. This one is, I got this in 1972, and I don't know if it is still available or not. I would imagine it is. So it is published by Achyuta Granthamala Karyalaya in Kashi. So let's see if we can find it. Anyway, so that's part of it. I think at some point in time it'll be nice to just teach it. I am not sure whether I should do it in the advanced class or an elementary class or whatever, but I think it would be nice to go through that. Anyway, so I think those are the questions that you had. Virendra Singh, where to get Hindi version of Swami Shankarananda commentary. I think once we find out, I think I'll wait for Amit Garg to tell us, and then I'll let you know. And you really do need magnifying lens for reading the text of Swami Shankarananda. So, all right, if there's no other questions, then I take your leave for today, and we will see you in the next week, which is the last class on Brahmasutra. Hari Om.